everyone, welcome to the Bagmaker's Workroom. Today we're going to talk about fabrics, some of our favorite things. We're going to talk about leathers, faux leathers, vinyls, cottons, cotton canvas, a whole array of things. As bag makers, fabrics are some of the best tools that we have because you can take a pattern, make it with two different fabrics, and the bag looks totally different. So today we're going to talk about some of those differences, how to tell the difference between certain kinds of fabrics. But first, welcome to my workroom. Okay, one of our favorite subjects, fabrics. They come in so many vibrant colors that we can't help but love them. And I think that we can all admit we have a little bit too much of them in our stash, but that's okay. There's two things that can really help you with fabrics. And one of them is a lighter, and the other one is a gauge. This is a gauge that a lot of people use for leathers and finding out the thickness of different leathers. So we're going to come to this in a minute. We're going to set it aside. The first thing I want to talk about are the fabrics that we're all used to seeing and are readily available, and that's the cottons. Now, cottons are fabulous because they do come in so many different colors and motifs, and I mean, let's face it, they're just fabulous. But a lot of times they're not really great for a bag because they're so thin. So we end up having to stabilize them, and that's okay. But one thing I want to talk to you about is natural fiber fabrics versus handmade or man-made fabrics. The only way to really tell is to do a burn test. Now, this is sometimes even with a burn test it's hard because fibers are mixed. So if you've got a textile that is part cotton, part poly, then it's going to be a little more difficult to tell when you burn it. But I do want to show you a couple of things. So here's a piece of cotton. And when you burn cotton, what happens is you get an orange glow. When you blow it out, the glow stays, and you can smell, you have a white smoke, and you can smell almost like a wood scent. Wood or leaves burning, that's kind of what it smells like. So that's what's going to happen when you burn 100% cotton. When you burn 100% linen, you're going to get exactly the same thing. So you're going to get that orange glow. And when you burn it out, you have a glow, again orange, the smoke is white, and it smells like wood burning. Make sure that's out good. Now, when you burn a man-made fiber, like a poly or something like that, you're going to see how it burns differently. Well, okay, you've got a pretty big flame there, and I don't know if you can see, but that smoke was actually black. There's no orange ember or orange glowing at the end here. And you can almost feel this feels plasticky. It's almost like it's melted. So the reason why I go through that with these particular fabrics is because a lot of times we are using a fabric that we think is cotton and it may not be. And maybe our interfacing is not adhering to it really well. And sometimes that happens when you have some kind of poly or man-made fiber. A lot of times it's not your interfacing, it's your actual fabric. Another thing is that your linens and your cottons are going to press a lot nicer. You're going to get a much better crease in them, where typically polys don't press really well. So when you look at these different fibers for your bags, whether it be the exterior or the interior of a bag, you do want to make sure, in my opinion, I always try to, oops, I think I hit my microphone, sorry. I always try to use the natural fibers, the natural materials versus the polys. Poly has its place, don't get me wrong. It's just that it's not always in bag making. The other thing I want to talk about is knit versus wovens. So we all know what knit fabric is. Knit is the fabric that we put on our bodies. A lot of times that stretches when we move, and it's fantastic for that because we are not square people. We have bumps and lumps, and right, we move and we're not stationary. So knit is great for clothing. Knit has other places as well, but typically it's not on bags. So when you're sewing a long strap or when you're sewing two pieces together on a bag, you want that to be really sturdy and you want it to have a good strong base and hand. You don't want it to be shifting or stretching. So typically you don't want to use knits for bag making. Now you can take a knit and put a woven interfacing on it and change it essentially from a knit to a woven. Once you put woven interfacing on a knit fabric, it's not going to stretch anymore. However, just generally, we're going to say that you want to try to stay away from knits for bag making. Okay, moving along, let's talk about cotton canvas. So we just talked about cotton, and cotton again is usually fairly lightweight, great for linings. Not so much for the exterior of a bag, although you certainly, for pouches and certain things, it's perfect. The cotton canvas is a little bit thicker, and as you can see these two piles, they both have the same amount of yardage on them, but you can see the cotton canvas, even though it's 3 bolts and 3 bolts, those 3 bolts are taller than these 3 bolts, and it's because it's a thicker material. Typically, it's better for the exterior of bags because it is has a little more substance to it. The great thing about cotton canvases is that you can get them in all kinds of colors and with all different kinds of motifs, and they are really great to use on the exterior of bags, especially if you're sewing with a domestic machine. So typically domestic machines can handle the cottons and the cotton canvases really well because they are thinner fabrics. You're typically not going to get a lot of bulk, especially if you keep your stabilizers and your interfacing out of your seam allowances. So if you have a domestic machine, probably a lot of times you're going to be using the actual cotton canvas for your exterior bags and then maybe cotton for the interior of your bags. So before we move on to faux leathers and vinyls, I want to talk about waterproof canvas for just a minute. Both of these are waterproof canvas, and as you can see, they're coming out with more vibrant colors than ever before. This is a great fabric to work with if you need something really obviously waterproof, but if you have something that it needs some structure and you want it to hold up. If you have any kind of like beach bag, you probably want to make it out of waterproof canvas. If you have some kind of water bottle holder bag, you're probably going to want to at least do the lining out of waterproof canvas. The waterproof canvas really protects either the interior of the bag or the exterior of the bag, depending on where it is. And literally, you can pour water on this and it just rolls right off. It is great for like baby bags as well, diaper bags, especially the interior of those. So make sure that you keep waterproof canvas on hand. You're going to find that you use it. Because it's so stiff as well, a lot of times it helps to give structure to the bag. So you typically do not interface waterproof canvas, and because one side, and you can see on this particular fabric here, the back side is solid, the front side is vibrant, and the back is just like a solid gray. This will melt. This is plastic. So you cannot put an iron on this at all. If you do, it will literally melt. It will melt right on your iron. You can iron the front of it quickly. And a lot of times when I do, I'll even put a Teflon sheet on top of it before I iron it. If you have like little wrinkles or things you want to get out, you can certainly do that, but don't iron the back. It does provide, like I said, stability, and it's really great for that. You don't have to interface it. It's really a wonderful thing to use. And in the right setting, waterproof canvas is exceptional. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of other things. Let's talk about cork. Cork is a natural substance, and this is the same cork this cork here is the same kind of cork that they use in wine bottles and everything else. What they're doing is they're just adhering it to a piece of fabric, essentially, a piece of backing, and it is cork fabric. Now, cork fabric typically, there's a couple of different, it can come in different thicknesses. Usually 0.4 millimeters is going to be a super thin cork. 0.7 is usually a little bit thicker and I don't want to say better quality because you're going to use the different corks for different things, but probably better for bag making. So if you take this little gauge, and the way that you use it is you literally put it on the bag or put it in between, and you just click it down, you'll see that this is almost 1 millimeter thick. So this is a thicker cork, something that would be great for bag making, in my opinion. Now, cork is probably one of the most expensive things that is out there because it is bark off of a tree, and they can only strip the tree of the bark, I think it's every 7 years. So, there's only so much of it out there. Also, I think that there's I don't know a lot about cork, but I can tell you to get it from the tree to on here and get it colored, it's a long process. It's a beautiful textile, there's no doubt about it. But you have to be careful because sometimes cork can split or crack, and you want to make sure you're getting a good quality cork from a reputable person. So cork makes, again, gorgeous bags. It's a very unique textile to use, and it can be typically sewn on a domestic machine. So if you have a domestic machine, it's really a great option to use some cork. And of course, they're coming out with different colors, and they're coming out with prints and all kinds of neat styles now. So it's really a great medium to use. Okay, let's talk about faux leather and vinyl. What is the difference? That is the question I see all the time. In reality, there is no difference. They're both man-made products from plastics. Okay? However, I feel like there is definitely a different feel to some of them than others. So for instance, this is a marine vinyl. So this is the kind of vinyl that they use on boats and things like that. It has kind of a white knit backing, and this is very typical of marine vinyl. Obviously it comes in all kinds, this is a really beautiful, vibrant rose kind of color. And it's stiffer. If I hold it up like this, you see it kind of curves back, but only because I had it rolled up. I mean, it's pretty stiff. If we put the gauge to it, it comes in at over 1 millimeter. It's about 1.3 millimeters. Okay. But, it's not it doesn't have a super soft hand. I consider this vinyl. On the other hand, here's a piece of, theoretically it's vinyl, it's a man-made product made out of plastics, but it has got a much softer hand. And you can see how when you hold it up, it's got a better drape to it. If I hold this one up, okay, you see the difference in the two? In my opinion, I would call this a faux leather. I would call this a vinyl. They're really not that different. I mean, they're both, like I said, man-made. But to me, faux leather is a feel. So this particular product here has got a black, kind of a fuzzy backing. Super soft. Oh my gosh, it's so soft. It is amazing. And the thickness of it is 0.9 millimeters. So you could sew this on a domestic machine. I think anything over 1, you're going to start having problems on a domestic machine. It's not necessarily the backing that makes it faux leather or vinyl, it's more the feel, okay? So in my opinion, this is a faux leather. So faux leathers are softer, they have a drapier effect, and I think, and I wouldn't even say they're thinner a lot of times, that's not even the case, it has more to do with the feel. So if we take a look at this right here, here's another piece. This is a beautiful snake print. And it's got a fuzzy backing. It's got a very light fuzzy backing. But when I take it and I hold it up, see, it doesn't have that drapiness, okay? So even though this has a fuzzy backing, and it is, let's see the millimeters, it's about 0.8 millimeters, I would consider this a vinyl. So vinyls, faux leathers, again, I think it just has more to do with the feel than anything else. They're both fabulous to work with, and just depending on what machine you have is going to depend on how well they sew for you. So try some different thicknesses. This gauge is fantastic because you can really get to know your machine and how much it can handle, especially when you start doing straps and things that have multiple thicknesses, 4 thicknesses. Okay, so let's move on to leather. Leather is gorgeous. Leather can be difficult because there's so many different thicknesses. You've got veg tan and you have chrome tan. Veg tan is literally vegetable dyed. They put them in these big tubs, these big vats. They put the skins in and they let it marinate, for lack of a better word, soak, for so many days, 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is. And when they pull them out, they're tanned. Then you have chrome tanned. Now chrome tanned is a process that only takes a few days, and it's done with chemicals. One is not necessarily any better than the other, it's just 2 different ways to get to the same end result. Typically your veg tanned leathers are going to be a little bit stiffer and a little bit thicker, although not always. So here's a piece of veg tan. It's got a very almost rustic kind of feel to it, and it measures 2.1. So this is going to have a difficult time going through a domestic machine for sure. If I was going to use this even on my industrial machines, I would skive down where the edges are going to be or where the seams are going to be so that they fold over nice. Typically, veg tanned is used by bag makers that don't use machines, or they use machines for very little of the process. They do a lot of hand stitching, and they're beautiful bags. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're absolutely gorgeous. I don't know that I have the patience to do that, but your veg tan, and a lot of times your veg tan are used for things like leashes and dog collars and that type of stuff. They're thicker belts are typically veg tan, okay? So those are your veg tan leathers. Now, before we get into this here, let's talk about chrome. So your chrome tan, this is a leather here, this yellow. It is a snake, not that unlike the faux leather that we just looked at. And it is a chrome tanned leather. Now it is a skin, you can see it's shaped differently. And typically the backs on these are either suede, like this one's kind of a suede feeling. They are, let me see, this is a chrome tan leather, and this is about 1.1 millimeter. So I would not skive this, I would just run this through my machine without a problem. Depending on what kind of domestic machine you have, you might be able to use something like this. You probably, with the right needle, you probably wouldn't have a problem with it. They are coming up with so many different types of prints. You can emboss leather. You can do this kind of print like this on here, and they are just fabulous. So leather comes in all different thicknesses, all different ounces. Sometimes you see it by the ounce, sometimes you see it by the millimeter. You'll see 5 to 6 ounce leather, and that will translate to so many millimeters. But leather is something that I think is absolutely gorgeous. I know that there are some people who really don't like working with leather, and I have to say that the faux leathers are so realistic now that if you just don't want to work with leather, don't work with leather. It's okay. I mean, the faux are so beautiful and not unlike the genuines. Okay, I mean, you know, standing from a distance, you really couldn't see the difference in those two. By touch, you know, I probably can, but I don't know that the average person would know that this is leather just by touching it. It's got a very smooth touch, where this has got a little rougher. They might even think this is the real leather. So that's the great thing about living in today's day and age, is there's so many things out there that we can use and just create these beautiful bags. This here is a piece of genuine ostrich, and it is just beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. This one measures about 1.1, and I made a passport cover out of this and did not have to skive it at all. It was fine to work with. So when I'm saying 1.1, I'm not saying, that doesn't mean ounces, that's millimeters, okay? But a lot of times you can even pick up scraps of leather, like if you want to try it out, see how your machine handles it, it would be a great thing to do. Also, maybe mix, so put some genuine leather maybe with some cotton canvas, or genuine leather with some cotton. And that might make the sewing process a little easier depending on your machine. So there are lots of options out there. There's no rules. You can do whatever you want. It's your bag. Just know that we've got so many things to choose from. So the last kind of leather that I want to talk to you about is hair on hide. Now, hair on hide is exactly what it says. The hair is left on the hide. Okay. And it is just a beautiful, beautiful leather. And the greatest thing about this is, you know, there's so many colors. I mean, God creates whatever you see here. You've got different kinds. You've got some that have the longer hair, some that have the shorter hair, because you have different kinds of, you've got goat, cow, lamb, I mean, it goes on and on. These are great, very, very stylish bags. And this here, I'm just trying to give you an idea of what some of these measure. This one measures almost 2 millimeters. So it's a fairly thick one. Sometimes these are a little harder to run through the skiving machine because of the hair. So if you're going to work with hair on hide, you probably want to see if you can get it as thin as possible if you're going to run it through a sewing machine. If you're going to use it by hand, if you can do some hand stitching, then something like this would not be a problem. Last thing that I want to talk about is what types of textiles you use for certain bags. So a lot of times the patterns will tell you give you some suggested fabrics, and that's fantastic. You need to go ahead and pay attention to the pattern designer and what they're saying, because they're telling you that for a reason. Now, that's not to say you can't experiment with different things, because a lot of times using a different textile for the same bag is going to give you a totally different look. For instance, this bag right here, this bag is meant to be folded over. So when I made this, I wanted to make sure that the faux leather that I used was very soft and durable. Basically, I had to use a faux leather, not a vinyl, because a vinyl would not have folded over like this. So look at the construction of the bag and look at exactly what you have going on with it, because if you have something like this, you can't use certain types of stiffer materials. This bag here is just the opposite. If I had used a slouchy faux leather type of product for it, it wouldn't stand up the way it does. So what I did here was not only did I use a vinyl, but of course the stabilizers, which we'll talk about in a different session, helps this bag be as stand up and rigid as it is. So the stabilizers do play into the stability of the bag. However, some of it is just simply the materials. So this bag right here would do great in a cotton canvas. It would be fabulous because of the fact it folds over. This one, maybe not so much. If you used a cotton canvas for this, you may have to add extra stabilizer. So just be aware of the actual bag that you're getting ready to make and take a look at the different fabrics and what might be best for that particular bag. If you're not sure, ask the pattern designer. A lot of times they are more than willing to help you determine exactly what you should use for any given bag. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Bagmaker's Workroom. Hopefully you learned a little bit something about the textiles available for bag making and what might be right for your bag. Next time we're going to talk about cutting. We're going to talk about cutting mats, rulers, and cutting tools, and the things that will help you be very successful in your workroom. So until next time, happy sewing.